Chapter 1. I died because of Excel. The last thing Xu Qing remembered before dying was an Excel spreadsheet. Not a loved one. Not a meaningful life memory. Not even a dramatic final speech. Just a spreadsheet. Specifically, cell G47. He had been staring at it for 3 hours trying to figure out why the numbers refused to match. His boss wanted the report by morning. The client wanted revisions. His co-workers had already gone home. And Xu Qing, 26 years old, underpaid, overworked, and fueled entirely by coffee, had somehow fallen asleep at his desk. Forever. When he opened his eyes again, he immediately knew something was wrong. The ceiling above him was carved from dark wood. Silk curtains draped around a massive bed. Golden incense burners filled the room with a scent that cost more than his monthly rent. Xu Qing blinked. Either heaven has upgraded dramatically. A sharp pain exploded inside his head. Memories flooded into his mind. A palace. An emperor. Schemes. Poison. Political factions. Execution. Xu Qing sat bolt upright. No. More memories crashed into him. No, 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 no. He looked around wildly. Then he spotted a bronze mirror. He stumbled toward it. The face staring back at him was stunning. Pale skin. Long black hair. Fox-like eyes. Beautiful enough to ruin lives. Xu Qing nearly fainted. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. He recognized that face. Because 3 days ago he had spent an entire weekend binge reading a palace romance novel. And now he was inside it. Specifically, inside the body of Xu Rong. The villain. The biggest villain. The idiot who spent 600 chapters bullying innocent people before getting publicly beheaded. Xu Qing's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the floor. This can't be happening. According to the novel, Xu Rong was the emperor's favorite consort for exactly 2 months. After that, he became obsessed with power. He framed rivals, abused servants, provoked ministers, bullied the protagonist, and eventually annoyed Emperor Li Wei enough to earn himself a one-way trip to the execution grounds. Xu Qing remembered the scene vividly. Rain, chains, public humiliation, one clean swing of the executioner's blade. End of story. Xu Qing slapped his face. Hard. It hurt. Very much. Unfortunately, that confirmed he wasn't dreaming. How long do I have? He searched his memories. Then froze. 3 months. 3 months before everything went wrong. 3 months before his first major scheme. 3 months before he began digging his own grave. Xu Qing slowly stood. A grin spread across his face. Then he laughed. The servants outside looked alarmed. Because their notoriously vicious master was laughing like a madman. But Xu Qing couldn't help it. 3 months was plenty. Because unlike the original Xu Rong, he had absolutely no interest in power. He had survived corporate life. Palace politics looked exhausting. His new plan was simple. Step 1. Don't bully anyone. Step 2. Avoid drama. Step 3. Eat well. Step 4. Sleep. A lot. He was rich. Beautiful. Living in a palace. Why would he waste energy plotting? A maid cautiously entered. Your Grace. Xu Qing turned. The poor girl immediately flinched. Apparently, the original owner enjoyed throwing things at servants. Wonderful. Xu Qing smiled. She nearly fainted. Would you like breakfast? Yes. The maid relaxed slightly. Then Xu Qing added. And lunch. What? And dinner. And maybe snacks between meals. The maid looked terrified. Xu Qing sighed. I like food. The maid looked even more confused. Apparently, this body had spent years surviving on ambition and hatred. What a tragic waste. 20 minutes later, breakfast arrived. Xu Qing stared at the table. There were buns, soup, tea, pastries, fruit, roast duck. At breakfast, he almost cried. Back in his old life, breakfast had been instant coffee. Now he was living like royalty. Maybe transmigration wasn't entirely terrible. He grabbed a bun, took a bite, closed his eyes. Pure happiness. He was on his 3rd serving when another servant rushed inside. Your Grace. Xu Qing looked up. What? The emperor is coming. The bun fell from his hand. The emperor? Here? Today? That wasn't supposed to happen. In the novel, Emperor Li Wei rarely visited Xu Rong. At least not this early. Xu Qing immediately panicked. The emperor was the most dangerous man in the entire story. Cold, calculating, terrifyingly intelligent, and eventually responsible for Xu Rong's execution. His survival plan had one critical rule. Never attract the emperor's attention. Unfortunately, Footsteps echoed outside. The doors opened, and Emperor Li Wei entered. Tall, handsome, dressed in black and gold robes. The kind of handsome that made entire kingdoms start wars. His sharp eyes immediately landed on Xu Qing. Silence filled the room. Xu Qing froze. The emperor froze. Then Li Wei slowly looked at the mountain of food covering the table. The roast duck, the pastries, the fruit, the half-eaten buns. Then back at Xu Qing. What are you doing? Xu Qing swallowed. Think. Think fast. What would a normal person say? Unfortunately, panic won. Eating. The room fell silent. A muscle twitched in the emperor's jaw. For several long seconds neither spoke. Then Li Wei asked, "You skipped morning court." Xu Qing blinked. Apparently consorts attended certain ceremonies. Oops. The emperor narrowed his eyes. "You skipped your lessons." Oops again. And then ordered enough food to feed 20 people. Xu Qing looked at the table. Fair point. The emperor stared at him. Xu Qing stared back. Finally, he gave the most honest answer possible. "I was tired." Li Wei's expression became unreadable. Xu Qing had a horrible feeling. Because instead of leaving, the emperor sat down, directly across from him, and said, "Interesting." Xu Qing's soul immediately left his body. Chapter 2. The most suspicious lazy man in the empire. The moment Emperor Li Wei left, Xu Qing collapsed face first onto his bed. He didn't even bother removing his shoes. He simply accepted death. Not literal death. Social death. Psychological death. The kind of death that happened when the future executioner of your novel became interested in you. Xu Qing buried his face in a pillow. This was bad. Very bad. Extremely bad. In the original story, Emperor Li Wei barely tolerated Xu Rong. Most of their interactions involved cold indifference. Now, the man had personally come to investigate him. Twice. In one day? At this rate, Xu Qing would be executed ahead of schedule. A knock interrupted his suffering. He ignored it. Another knock followed. Still ignored. The third knock came with a voice. "Your Grace." Xu Qing groaned. "What?" "The imperial tailor has arrived." "No." A pause. "The imperial physician is here." "No." Another pause. "The court musician." "No." Silence. Then the servant carefully asked, "Would your Grace like lunch?" Xu Qing immediately sat up. "Why didn't you say so?" Half an hour later, Xu Qing was enjoying braised pork and lotus soup in blissful silence. This was the life. No deadlines. No meetings. No spreadsheets. No emails beginning with. Just a quick reminder. Those words alone could trigger traumatic memories. Xu Qing lifted another spoonful of soup. A servant suddenly burst into the room. "Your Grace." Soup nearly entered his lungs. "What now?" The servant looked alarmed. "Miss Zizi is here." Xu Qing blinked. Then remembered. Zizi, the female lead. The kindest person in the entire novel. Also one of the few people the original Xu Rong had relentlessly bullied. Wonderful. Xu Qing sighed. If he wanted to survive, he needed allies. And making peace with Zizi seemed like a very smart place to start. Bring her in. A few moments later, a young woman entered. She wore pale blue robes. Her features were delicate, elegant, beautiful, yet there was nervousness in her eyes. Understandably, the last time she had visited this palace, Xu Rong had accused her of stealing jewelry she didn't steal. Xu Qing felt secondhand embarrassment. The original owner really had been awful. "Greetings, Consort Xu." Xu Qing immediately stood. "Sit." Zizi froze. Xu Qing froze. The servant froze. Everyone froze. Apparently Consort Xu Rong had never offered anyone a seat before. Xu Qing mentally screamed. He was going to spend the next 6 months accidentally shocking people with basic manners. Zizi cautiously sat down, like she expected a trap. Xu Qing pushed a plate of pastries toward her. She stared at them, then stared at him, then stared back at the pastries. "Are these safe?" Xu Qing covered his face. "I deserve that." A small laugh escaped her. The first genuine smile he'd seen. Progress, finally. An hour later they were somehow discussing life. Xu Qing still wasn't sure how it happened. One moment they were drinking tea. The next, Zizi was confessing her worries. "What if people never change their opinion of me?" Xu Qing paused. That wasn't in the novel. That sounded real. Painfully real. He leaned back, thinking, then shrugged. "People are stubborn." Zizi blinked. "What?" "Most people decide who you are and refuse to update their information." She listened quietly. Xu Qing continued. That's their problem. Her eyes widened slightly. He smiled. If you're busy living your life, eventually they'll either catch up or get left behind. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, nobody has ever said that to me before. Xu Qing nearly laughed. Corporate burnout apparently qualified him as a philosopher. Who knew? Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, Emperor Li Wei stood beneath a flowering plum tree. Listening. A shadow knelt before him. One of his spies. Your Majesty. Li Wei remained silent. The spy lowered his head. Consort Xu spent the entire morning eating. He then took a nap. After waking, he ate again. Li Wei frowned. The spy continued. He has shown no signs of contacting political allies. No response. No secret meetings. Still nothing. No suspicious activity. Li Wei's eyes narrowed. That was suspicious. The former Xu Rong couldn't go an hour without scheming. Now, the man spent entire days sleeping. Either Xu Rong had gone insane, or he was planning something far more dangerous. Li Wei looked toward the distant palace. His expression darkened. I want 24-hour surveillance. The spy blinked. Your Majesty? Every movement. Even while sleeping? Li Wei answered without hesitation. Especially while sleeping. Back inside the palace, Xu Qing sneezed. Then sneezed again. A strange chill ran down his spine. He looked around suspiciously. Do you ever feel like someone is watching you? Zizi looked confused. No. Xu Qing frowned. Weird. Very weird. Then again, he was living inside a novel. Maybe paranoia was normal. He grabbed another pastry. The future could wait. Right now, he had dessert. Unfortunately for him, across the palace grounds, Emperor Li Wei was already watching. And for the first time in years, the emperor found someone genuinely impossible to understand, which was exactly how Xu Qing became the most interesting person in the empire, without even trying. Chapter 3. The Emperor's New Hobby. Xu Qing discovered something deeply disturbing 3 days later. The emperor had no life. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. A terrible coincidence. The kind of coincidence that eventually got people executed. On the first day, he had gone to the lotus garden after breakfast. The weather was perfect. The breeze was cool. The lotus flowers were blooming. The snacks were excellent. Xu Qing had stretched out on a stone bench and prepared for what he considered an extremely productive afternoon. A nap. Then he looked up and found Emperor Li Wei standing across the lake. Watching him, Xu Qing had nearly swallowed a lotus seed whole. The emperor simply nodded, then walked away. Weird. Very weird. The second day, Xu Qing decided to visit the palace library. Not because he enjoyed reading. Absolutely not. Books required effort. Effort was the natural enemy of happiness. However, the library happened to be quiet. Quiet places were excellent for sleeping. Xu Qing had barely settled into a secluded corner before a familiar shadow appeared. Emperor Li Wei, again, standing among the shelves. Watching him, like a particularly handsome ghost. Xu Qing had immediately stood up, turned around, and left. There was no way he was falling for whatever strange historical romance nonsense this was. Unfortunately, today was day 3, and things were getting worse. Much worse. Xu Qing stared at the man currently sitting across from him. Li Wei stared back. They were alone in a pavilion. Xu Qing had specifically chosen this pavilion because it was isolated, remote, peaceful, hidden, inaccessible, a perfect place to enjoy afternoon tea. And yet somehow, the emperor was here. Again, Xu Qing slowly lowered his teacup. Your Majesty. Consort Xu. Do you need something? No. Xu Qing blinked. Then blinked again. No. Li Wei calmly drank his tea. No. Xu Qing stared. The emperor stared back. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Xu Qing pointed at himself. Then why are you here? Li Wei looked thoughtful. As emperor, am I forbidden from visiting my own garden? Xu Qing opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's annoyingly reasonable. Li Wei's lips twitched. Xu Qing immediately sat upright. Hold on. Wait. No. Impossible. Surely not. The emperor couldn't have almost smiled. That would imply he was capable of humor. And Xu Qing refused to believe that. Meanwhile, inside Li Wei's mind, confusion. Pure confusion. For 3 days he had watched Xu Rong. 3 entire days. He had expected secrets, plots, conspiracies, political maneuvering. Instead, he discovered that Xu Rong apparently possessed the soul of an elderly retired grandfather. The man slept constantly. He ate frequently. And whenever someone attempted to discuss politics, he fled. Li Wei had personally witnessed a minister approach him. The minister had barely spoken 3 sentences before Xu Rong suddenly claimed an urgent appointment elsewhere, then ran away. Actually ran. The future mastermind of countless palace schemes had sprinted down a corridor to avoid responsibility. Li Wei still wasn't sure how to process that. Nothing made sense. Which made Xu Rong dangerous? Or interesting? Possibly both. Xu Qing suddenly sneezed. Twice. He narrowed his eyes. Someone was definitely talking about him. Probably fate. Fate seemed to hate him. Li Wei tilted his head. Are you ill? Xu Qing sighed dramatically. Spiritually. Spiritually? Yes. The emperor waited. Xu Qing pointed toward the sky. I believe heaven wants me dead. Li Wei looked upward. The sky was perfectly clear. No evidence suggests that. Xu Qing laughed. Oh, your majesty. What? If heaven loved me, would I be having this conversation? For a moment, actual laughter flashed through Li Wei's eyes. Gone almost instantly. But Xu Qing saw it and immediately felt alarmed. Because attractive men laughing was dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Especially in novels. The next morning brought new problems. Xu Qing hated new problems. New problems required effort. Effort required movement. Movement was exhausting. Unfortunately, today's problem arrived wearing pink silk robes. Xu Qing. Xu Qing groaned. Zizi had arrived. Again. Not that he disliked her. Quite the opposite. She was nice. Normal. Reasonable. Which made her one of the few sane people in this entire palace. The problem was that she always brought drama. And today was no exception. Zizi dropped onto a chair. You need to help me. Xu Qing immediately pointed at himself. Why? You're wise. Xu Qing nearly choked. Tea exploded everywhere. The servant screamed. Zizi looked concerned. Xu Qing looked offended. Wise? Yes. I ate 3 desserts before breakfast. That's unrelated. I got lost inside my own palace yesterday. Also unrelated. I once spent an hour looking for a hat that was already on my head. Zizi frowned. How? I don't know. She sighed. You're still helping me. Xu Qing accepted defeat. What happened? Zizi hesitated, then lowered her voice. Someone is spreading rumors. Xu Qing immediately groaned. Of course. Palace politics, his least favorite activity. Actually, no. His least favorite activity was exercise. Politics ranked second. What kind of rumors? Zizi looked embarrassed. People are saying. Xu Qing waited. That His Majesty favors me. Xu Qing blinked. Then laughed. And laughed. And laughed harder. Zizi stared. Xu Qing wiped tears from his eyes. That's ridiculous. I know. The emperor barely looks at people. Exactly. He looks at everyone like he's considering their funeral. Exactly. Xu Qing nodded. See? Problem solved. Zizi looked unconvinced. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, a shadow fell across the table. Xu Qing froze. Because he already knew who it was. Slowly, very slowly, he turned around. Emperor Li Wei stood behind him. Again, like a demon summoned by inconvenience. Xu Qing was starting to suspect the man teleported. There was no other explanation. The emperor's gaze moved towards Zizi, then towards Xu Qing, then back towards Zizi. A strange silence followed. Xu Qing immediately sensed danger. Not execution danger. Something worse. Awkward conversation danger. The emperor sat down. Directly beside Xu Qing. Not across. Beside. Close enough for Xu Qing to notice the faint scent of sandalwood. Close enough to be annoying. Very annoying. Xu Qing shifted slightly. Li Wei shifted too. Closer. Xu Qing stared. The emperor calmly poured tea. What were you discussing? Xu Qing answered immediately. Nothing. Zizi answered immediately. Rumors. The two looked at each other. Traitor. Complete traitor. Li Wei raised an eyebrow. Rumors? Zizi nodded. Xu Qing considered faking his death. It was becoming an increasingly attractive option. Then Zizi smiled sweetly. The palace thinks His Majesty likes me. The pavilion became silent. Very, very silent. Xu Qing waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Then, Li Wei looked at Zizi. I do not. Direct. Efficient. Absolutely ruthless. Poor girl. Xu Qing almost felt bad. Almost. Then Li Wei turned toward him. and asked, "Why would they think that?" Xu Qing blinked. Wait, why was he being asked? He wasn't involved. He was just sitting here, existing, trying not to die. Yet somehow, every conversation eventually became his problem. Zizi seemed equally confused. The emperor continued staring, waiting, expecting an answer. Xu Qing sighed. Fine. If they wanted honesty, they would get honesty. Because people are stupid. Silence. A servant dropped a tray. Somewhere in the distance, a bird flew away. Li Wei stared. Zizi stared. Xu Qing shrugged. What? The emperor looked amused again. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Then he asked, and what rumors are they spreading about you? Xu Qing froze. The blood left his face. Because suddenly, he remembered. The palace wasn't only spreading rumors about Zizi. There were rumors about him too. Lots of rumors. Specifically, rumors connecting him and the emperor. Xu Qing immediately stood. I suddenly remembered I have important business elsewhere. Li Wei grabbed his sleeve. The world stopped. Xu Qing stared at the hand, then at the emperor, then back at the hand. His heart skipped. Not because it was romantic, absolutely not. Because nobody warned him that the emperor would touch people. The man usually communicated through intimidation. Li Wei's eyes met his. Dark, sharp, unreadable. Dinner tonight. Xu Qing blinked. What? Dinner? Why? The emperor looked genuinely thoughtful, then answered with terrifying honesty. Because I, king, do not need a reason to summon my consort. Xu Qing turned away from the emperor and huffed and shuddered. And to himself, more like king of cringe lines. Again, Chapter 4, Roast Duck, Bad Decisions, and an Accidental Hero. Xu Qing spent the entire afternoon preparing for dinner like a man marching toward his execution. Which, honestly, wasn't far from the truth. The last time Emperor Li Wei had called someone interesting, that person ended up working 16 hours a day managing border affairs. Xu Qing had investigated. The poor official looked 10 years older. That was horrifying. Xu Qing would rather face actual execution. At least that only happened once. Your Grace. A servant bowed. The imperial tailor has arrived. No. The imperial hairdresser. No. The imperial perfumer. No. The servant looked distressed. But your Grace is dining with His Majesty. Xu Qing nodded. I know. Then shouldn't you prepare? Xu Qing glanced down at his robes. They were comfortable, soft, loose, perfect for eating. I am prepared. The servant looked like he wanted to cry. By sunset, Xu Qing arrived at the emperor's private dining hall and immediately became suspicious. The table was enormous. The food was magnificent. There were enough dishes to feed a small army. Yet only 2 seats were occupied, one by Li Wei, one waiting for Xu Qing. This wasn't dinner. This was an interrogation disguised as dinner. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Xu Qing sat. Li Wei looked up. For some reason, the emperor's gaze lingered. Longer than necessary. Xu Qing immediately checked himself. Is something on my face? No. My hair? No. My robe? No. Then why are you staring at me? Li Wei calmly took a sip of wine. I wasn't. Xu Qing pointed dramatically. Liar. The emperor almost smiled. Almost. It was becoming alarmingly frequent. Dinner began peacefully, for exactly 7 minutes, which, in palace terms, was practically a miracle. Xu Qing was halfway through demolishing a plate of roast duck when the doors burst open. A minister rushed inside, pale, sweating, panicked. Your Majesty. Li Wei's expression darkened immediately. Being interrupted during meals was apparently a serious offense. The minister nearly tripped over himself. There is a crisis. Xu Qing groaned. Of course there was. There was always a crisis. Nobody in this empire knew how to relax. The minister dropped to his knees. The grain warehouses in the northern provinces are reporting shortages. Li Wei frowned. The room instantly grew serious. Even Xu Qing stopped eating. Well, mostly stopped eating. He was still holding a drumstick. The minister continued. The reports don't match. Explain. According to official records, the warehouses are full. Li Wei's eyes narrowed. But the grain is gone. Xu Qing blinked. Then it clicked. Oh, I see, he thought to himself. So the usual palace politics. The minister continued speaking. Something about transportation records, missing inventory, and ongoing investigations. Xu Qing stopped listening halfway through, because he has no interest in being part of whatever is going on. He huffed. But then, The room fell silent, and all eyes turned on him. He raised an eyebrow and muttered, "What?" The emperor's eyes narrowed. "You know something?" Xu Qing immediately regretted making any noise. There goes his plan of being a salted fish. He signed then said nonchalantly. He really needed to stop. It's probably corruption. The minister looked offended. "We know that. Do you?" Xu Qing sighed. "No. I mean specifically." Li Wei leaned forward. The minister leaned forward. Even the servants leaned forward. Xu Qing suddenly felt attacked. I know I look nice, but ain't you all staring about too much?" "Continue." Xu Qing reluctantly obeyed. "Compare warehouse reports against transportation logs." "We did." "No. Compare them separately." The minister frowned. "What?" Xu Qing grabbed a piece of paper. Years of spreadsheet trauma suddenly awakened inside him. Like a dormant demon. The thieves are probably changing one set of records. He drew several lines. If grain leaves warehouse A. Another line. It must arrive somewhere. Another line. If the numbers don't match, someone is stealing inventory. The minister blinked. Xu Qing continued. If the numbers do match. More lines. Then someone is creating fake warehouse reports. The room fell silent. Li Wei and the minister stared at the paper in thought. Xu Qing stared at the roast duck. Priorities. Several long seconds passed. Then, the minister's eyes widened. "Oh." Xu Qing nodded. "Exactly. Oh. Congratulations. You're welcome to the land of brain cells." The minister suddenly stood with determination. "I understand." Then he ran out. Actually ran. Xu Qing watched him leave. Then heave a sigh of relief. And muttered to himself, "Peace, finally." Only to realize that the room is quiet. Suspiciously quiet. Xu Qing slowly returned to his duck, pretending he can't feel the awkward tension. Unfortunately, Li Wei was still staring. The emperor was always staring these days. It was becoming concerning. Annoyed, he muttered, "What? Can't I at least eat in peace?" Li Wei's gaze remained fixed on him. "Where did you learn that?" Still absent-minded. Xu Qing nearly answered honestly. "Excel." Fortunately, common sense intervened. "A dream." Silence. Li Wei stared. Xu Qing stared back. The emperor looked unconvinced. Xu Qing looked innocent. After a long moment, Li Wei smiled. Actually smiled. Not his usual smirk. A genuine smile. The servants nearly fainted. Xu Qing nearly fainted. Because suddenly he understood something terrifying. The Grinch Emperor was handsome. Extremely handsome. Unfairly handsome. Unfairly handsome. The kind of handsome that should require government approval. This realization alarmed him greatly, knowing fully well he has a soft spot for fine things. Then disaster struck again. Because apparently one crisis wasn't enough for the evening. A servant rushed inside, panicking. "Your Majesty." Li Wei sighed. Xu Qing sighed. The servant bowed. "The imperial kitchen is on fire." Xu Qing dropped his chopsticks. The room froze. Li Wei looked confused. "What wrong?" Xu Qing stood immediately. "The duck." The servant blinked. "What?" "The roasted duck." Li Wei covered his face. For the first time since becoming emperor, he found himself speechless. Meanwhile, Xu Qing was already halfway to the door. "Save the cooks," he shouted dramatically. "And the duck." "Mostly the duck." 1 hour later, the fire was extinguished. The kitchen survived. The cooks survived. Most importantly, the duck survived. Xu Qing sat on a stool outside the kitchen, covered in soot, but smiling with pride. Li Wei stood nearby, watching him with astonishment. Finally he spoke. "You ran into a burning building." Xu Qing nodded. "Yes." "For food." Yes." Li Wei looked toward the night sky, as if seeking strength from heaven. After several moments, the emperor sat beside him, close enough for their shoulders to touch. Xu Qing froze. Li Wei remained perfectly calm. "You know," the emperor said quietly, "you are unlike anyone I have ever met." Xu Qing sighed. "There it is again." "What?" "That sentence." Li Wei raised an eyebrow. Xu Qing pointed at him. "Every time you say something like that, my life becomes more difficult." For several seconds, Bather moved. Neither spoke. Then, Li Wei smirks at him, like knows something Xu Qing has realized yet. It was warm, dangerous, heart-stopping. And Xu Qing suddenly had a terrible feeling. Because surviving execution was becoming much easier. Surviving the emperor? That was an entirely different problem. Chapter 5. The Hunting Festival Disaster. Xu Qing had never been so excited to do absolutely nothing. The Royal Hunting Festival was a yearly tradition, a chance for nobles to ride horses, show off hunting prowess, and, frankly, tire themselves out. Xu Qing loved it because, for once, he didn't have to plan anything. No schemes, no spreadsheets, just him being his awesomely lazy self. But, alas, when has anything ever gone the way he planned at Xu Qing wasn't supposed to be a hero. Not today, not ever. He had a strict, unspoken rule: avoid the emperor's attention, eat snacks, and never, ever go into the forest alone. But fate had a cruel sense of humor, and that rule was shattered the moment he realized his emergency duck was gone. It wasn't just a snack. It was his anchor, his absurd comfort in a world spinning wildly out of control. So, naturally, Xu Qing marched straight into the forest, thinking he would just walk around a bit, maybe find a mushroom, anything but get himself tangled in palace sabotage. The forest was thick, the shadows heavy, and the silence was suffocating. Every snap of a branch made his pulse spike. He was halfway to a panic attack when a sound, low, muffled, caught his ear. He froze. And there, just beyond a thicket of juniper trees, was a faint plume of smoke. Not from a campfire, not from a hunter's torch, but from something clandestine, something hidden. Xu Qing's instincts kicked in with a ferocity that surprised even him. He crept closer, every step measured. Then he saw them. Two men, cloaked in black, whispering over a map, and one of them gestured toward the path the emperor would take. Xu Qing's stomach clenched. He didn't know who they were, but he recognized the lines, ambush points, patrol routes. And that map? That was a blueprint of the very trail Li Wei would follow on horseback. Xu Qing didn't have time to plot, didn't have time to call for backup. He just knew he had to act. Without thinking, he grabbed the nearest branch and snapped it loudly against a tree. The assassins froze. Xu Qing didn't wait for their next move. He turned and sprinted back toward the clearing, heart pounding. Behind him, shouts erupted. He burst out into the clearing just as Li Wei reined in his horse. The emperor was already gathering his guards. But Xu Qing didn't wait for the guards. He pointed to a narrow trail. Voice calm but biting. They're planning to ambush you on the northern ridge. And they're using Prince Yan. Li Wei froze. For the first time since Xu Qing had arrived, the emperor's face lost its ice, if only for a second. Because this wasn't just a rogue plot. This was a threat to the throne itself. Xu Qing didn't wait. He didn't gloat, and he didn't brag. He simply stepped aside, letting Li Wei mount his horse and ride. But behind that calm exterior, Xu Qing felt his heart pounding like a war drum. Because he knew the truth, the old Xu Qing, the one everyone despised, wasn't a natural schemer. He was a survivor. And the reason he plotted, the reason he kept everyone at arm's length, was because he had once been the emperor's favorite. And that made him a threat, a direct rival to the crown. Prince Yan, arrogant as ever, rode beside Li Wei later that evening, his smile sharp as a dagger. Xu Qing watched from a distance, and suddenly, he knew the cousin wasn't just a rival. He was a predator circling a wounded lion. But that wasn't Xu Qing's problem anymore. He wouldn't be a pawn this time. He'd let them fight. He'd let them scheme. And when the dust settled, Xu Qing would still be standing, because he wasn't just surviving. Now he was playing his own game. And this time, the stakes were life, death, and an empire waiting to crown or crush him. Chapter 6: The Emperor's Shadow and the Prince's Knife. The morning after the hunt, the palace was buzzing, with a strange electricity, like a storm brewing just outside the windows. Xu Qing, however, was lounging on his balcony, like he didn't have a care in the world. One leg swung over the railing, a small smirk on his lips as he sipped a cup of tea. After all, what was the point of grand schemes if you didn't sprinkle them with a dash of laziness? But beneath the calm surface, the tension churned. Prince Yan, his cousin, was a different kind of storm. Tall, perfect, and always just a half step ahead. Yan had a reputation for being a silver-tongued snake. Xu Qing knew it, knew that Yan wasn't just a dashing soldier. He was calculating, a predator dressed in silk. And every glance he threw at Xu Qing felt like a blade. That morning, as Xu Qing idly arranged his breakfast pastries, because even a strategic genius needed snacks, he spotted Yan across the courtyard, speaking quietly with a minister. a man whose smile was even more oily than Yan's grin. That was when Xu Qing realized his lazy act was over. He'd been a shadow too long. Now, he had to step into the light, and he would do it with a smile as sharp as a dagger. Xu Qing found his spy, a quiet maid, who was assigned to dust his windows but now listened for whispers. With a casual flick of his wrist, he slid her a tiny folded note. "Follow Prince Yan," he said, voice as light as a feather. "Every step. And if he meets with Minister Zhou, tell me." The maid didn't flinch. She'd seen far too many palace intrigues to question a lazy man with a pastry in hand. Meanwhile, Prince Yan had no idea he was being watched. He played the perfect game. Every smile, every word was polished, but there was a crack, and it was growing wider. Xu Qing could see it, because he'd been that cracked man before. And as the days passed, Xu Qing noticed small things. How Yin brushed off questions like a cat batting a fly, or how he lingered too long near the treasury, places where money moved, and power twisted. Then it happened. One evening, as Xu Qing strolled past the palace gardens, he caught a whisper, a servant mentioning a meeting by the old archery range. And suddenly, the pieces snapped together. Yin wasn't just a rival, he was a threat wrapped in silk. And if Xu Qing didn't act, he'd be the one standing in chains. So he smiled, that lazy smile, and waited, because now he wasn't just surviving. He was about to flip the board. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, but it couldn't cut through the weight in the air, because today, Xu Qing has been summoned to the court by the emperor and the court officials. Chapter 7. The Lazy Man's Masterstroke. As the court was filled with murmurs, Xu Qing leaned back, as if he were simply a spectator in a play he'd long since lost interest in. But behind that lazy yawn, his mind raced. Every step he'd taken since the hunt was deliberate, a lazy chess master moving pieces behind the scenes. His spy, a lowly kitchen maid, had delivered a gold mine of evidence, secret meetings near the treasury, forged tax records, and a chain linking Prince Yin to Minister Zhou, one of the most corrupt officials in the empire. Xu Qing didn't flinch. As the king sat on his golden throne, the officials began their desperate plea. Minister Zhou stood, voice oiled with false concern. "Your Majesty, consort Xu Qing has plotted against you. He's siphoning funds, conspiring with outside forces." The court leaned in, like a pack of wolves scenting blood, but Xu Qing only smiled. He didn't have to defend himself. He had facts. With a casual stretch, Xu Qing reached for his fan. "Is that so?" he said, his tone dripping with mock boredom. "Then perhaps you should explain why these documents say otherwise." The hall went still, as his spy stepped forward, handing a small scroll to the imperial secretary. The scroll held records of Yan's hidden accounts, proof of bribes, and coded letters from Zhou, all meticulously gathered. Every date cross-referenced, every name exposed. Xu Qing let the silence do the talking. He didn't leap up, didn't shout. He stayed exactly as he was, that lazy posture like a cat sprawled in a sunbeam. But his eyes gleamed like a blade in shadow. The king, who had leaned forward, now sat back, his fingers steepled. "Prince Yan," he said slowly, voice like ice. "You and Minister Zhou have betrayed not just me, but the empire." And just like that, the court shifted. Yan, once poised, froze, realizing his careful web was unraveling. When Xu Qing finally rose, it was almost lazy. His words were soft, but every syllable carried weight. "Your Majesty, I never wished for a throne, nor did I plot against you. But if you remove me now, you give them the power I never wanted." And so, with a smirk that was equal parts boredom and triumph, Xu Qing let the king's decree fall. Prince Yan was exiled, stripped of rank, and Minister Zhou was sentenced to life in the mines. And Xu Qing? He smiled, still lounging, still the picture of laziness, but everyone in that court knew he had just saved his life. And the next time someone underestimated him, they'd remember that this so-called lazy man had outmaneuvered the crown, the court, and death itself. Chapter 8. After the storm, the quiet tide. In the days following the courtroom reckoning, the palace fell into a strange lull. The thunderous accusations had faded, the traitors were in chains. And yet, for Xu Qing, the storm wasn't over. The king, still regal but now thoughtful, watched him from across the vast, golden halls, but something had shifted. Xu Qing, once a pawn, now stood tall, not in arrogance, but in a kind of quiet defiance, like a man who had once run from shadows and now walked beside them. That morning, as the sun spilled through the palace gardens, Zizi arrived, her smile as bright as spring but tinged with an anxious energy. "Xu Qing," she said, sitting by his side. "I know you don't care for court gossip, but there's a rumor. Prince Yan's old friend, General Wei, is visiting, and he likes me." Xu Qing snorted softly, then caught himself. He waved a hand, dismissing it. "Zizi, go on, enjoy your admirers. I'm too lazy to care about generals." But inside, his mind was already turning. Because every flirtation, every rumor, every innocent crush was just another layer in the palace. And beneath that relaxed smirk, Xu Qing was already calculating how to keep himself and the king safe. After the morning lull, Xu Qing was summoned to the king's private study. No fanfare, no crowd, just the two of them. Like the calm after a storm. Li Wei didn't speak at first, just watched, his gaze sharp, but his voice was slower. "Xu Qing," he said, leaning back, "after all that, I thought you'd disappear, but you stayed." And in that moment, the court didn't matter. No generals, no rumors, just a man who had survived a fire, a betrayal, and a world that underestimated him. Xu Qing grinned, still lazy, but now with a glint in his eye. "Your Majesty, I told you, I'm just here for the snacks. The throne was never my goal." And as he laughed, that lazy laugh that still somehow carried weight, Li Wei smiled. Because he saw it now, not a villain, not a schemer, but someone who had chosen survival over power, and for the first time, the king realized he wanted that man by his side. Chapter 9, Missing Something. Xu Qing was finally free. No assassins, no treason, no corrupt ministers, no Prince Yan, no court officials trying to have his head removed from his shoulders. Life was beautiful. Life was peaceful. Life was exactly how it was supposed to be. At least, that was what Xu Qing kept telling himself. The morning sunlight poured into his courtyard as he sat beneath his favorite peach tree. A table full of food sat before him. Fresh pastries, sweet rice cakes, steamed buns, tea, fruits, and most importantly, a perfectly roasted duck. Xu Qing sighed happily. "This," he pointed at the duck, "this is what victory looks like." A servant standing nearby smiled helplessly. "Your Majesty defeated an entire political faction." Xu Qing tore off a piece of duck. "And you exposed treason. And you saved the empire." Xu Qing stuffed the duck into his mouth. "And now I'm eating breakfast." The servant gave up. Honestly, serving Xu Qing required a special kind of patience. Most people who survived political warfare spent months recovering. Some became paranoid. Others became ambitious. Xu Qing became hungry. Life was unfair. For the first few days after the trial, Xu Qing felt wonderful. No one bothered him. No one plotted against him. No one dragged him into court. No one asked him to solve disasters. He slept. He ate. He wandered around the gardens. Sometimes he took naps after breakfast. Sometimes he took naps before breakfast. His schedule was very demanding. Then, something started feeling strange. At first, Xu Qing ignored it. Then he ignored it harder. Then he ignored it professionally. Unfortunately, it refused to disappear. The palace felt quiet. Too quiet. One morning passed. Then another. Then another. The emperor never appeared. No unexpected summons. No random dinners. No strange questions. No silent staring. No Li Wei. Xu Qing frowned. That was odd. Very odd. Not because he wanted to see the emperor. Absolutely not. That would be ridiculous. The emperor was annoying, suspicious, overbearing, and entirely too handsome for a man who spent most of his time looking angry. Xu Qing definitely did not miss him. Not at all. 3 more days passed. Xu Qing found himself staring at the palace gates. For no reason. Absolutely no reason. He was simply looking, casually. The servants exchanged glances. None dared to comment. On the 6th day, Xu Qing finally snapped. He pointed at a passing servant. "You." The servant nearly dropped a tray. "Why, Your Majesty? What has the emperor been up to lately?" The servant blinked.
"What?" Xu Qing immediately regretted asking. "No reason." The servant looked suspicious. Xu Qing looked away. The servant looked more suspicious. Xu Qing grabbed the pastry. The servant wisely retreated. Later that afternoon, Xu Qing sat alone in the pavilion overlooking the lotus pond. The breeze was pleasant. The scenery was beautiful. Everything should have felt perfect. Instead, he felt restless, which was deeply offensive. Xu Qing hated being restless. Restless people exercised. He had standards. He picked up a book, put it down, picked up tea, put it down, tried napping, failed. That was when Xu Qing realized something horrifying, something terrifying, something that made him question all his life choices. He missed Li Wei. The realization struck like lightning. Xu Qing sat upright. No. The lotus flowers remained silent. No. A bird chirped. No. The bird chirped again. Traitor. Xu Qing stared into the pond. Miss him. Impossible. Absurd. Ridiculous. The emperor was grumpy, intimidating, constantly appeared without warning. Half their conversations felt like interrogations. And yet, the palace felt emptier without him. The gardens felt quieter. The days felt longer. Xu Qing slowly covered his face. This is bad. Very bad. Because if there was one thing more dangerous than politics, it was feelings. And Xu Qing had spent an entire lifetime avoiding both. Far across the palace, Emperor Li Wei was suffering from exactly the same problem. And fortunately, he was handling it even worse. Your Majesty. Silence. Your Majesty. Still silence. The Minister of Revenue looked nervous. The entire court looked nervous. Because the emperor had been staring at the same document for nearly 10 minutes, without reading a single word. Li Wei blinked. What? The minister looked ready to cry. The grain report. Li Wei looked down. The report was upside down. The minister immediately looked away. For safety reasons, the emperor slowly turned it around. The court pretended not to notice. Everyone valued their lives. The meeting continued. Or at least, it tried to. Li Wei's thoughts drifted again. Back to Xu Qing. Back to the trial. Back to the lazy smile. Back to the way Xu Qing lounged through life as if the entire world was a mild inconvenience. Li Wei frowned. When had it started? He wasn't sure. Maybe during the kitchen fire. Maybe during the hunt. Maybe when Xu Qing stood alone against half the court and dismantled a conspiracy while looking half asleep. Somewhere along the way, the man he once viewed as a political burden had become indispensable. And somehow ... Li Wei wanted more. Not because Xu Qing's family was powerful. Not because of politics. Not because of alliances. For the first time in his life, Li Wei wanted someone simply because they were themselves. The realization was unsettling. The emperor closed his eyes, then opened them.
Decision made. Commander Zhao, the head guard, immediately stepped forward. Your Majesty, send gifts to Consort Xu. The court froze. The ministers froze. The scribes froze. Commander Zhao froze. Even the air froze. Li Wei continued calmly. Have the imperial kitchen prepare his favorite dishes. All of them. And tell the royal chefs to create new recipes, particularly involving roast duck. The court collectively stopped breathing. Li Wei ignored them, because for the first time in years, the emperor had decided to pursue something he wanted, and that something happened to be an infuriatingly lazy consort. Chapter 10: The Problem with Peace. Xu Qing had finally achieved his dream. Peace. Real peace. The kind of peace he had nearly died several times trying to obtain. No assassins. No political conspiracies. No treason. No corrupt ministers. No court officials trying to have him executed before breakfast. No Prince Yan. No surprise investigations. No problems. Life was perfect, which was exactly why Xu Qing was miserable. Something is wrong. The servant beside him nearly dropped the tea tray. Xu Qing rarely said things like that, usually because he was the thing that was wrong. Your Majesty? Xu Qing stared suspiciously at the pond. The pond stared back. I feel uncomfortable. The servant looked alarmed. Should he call a physician? An exorcist? A priest? All three? Xu Qing shoved a pastry into his mouth, chewed, swallowed, then frowned. Very suspicious. The pastry tasted fine. The tea tasted fine. The weather was fine. Everything was fine, which was exactly the problem. The palace had become boring. Terribly boring. Horrifically boring. Dangerously boring. 3 weeks ago he would have celebrated. Now he found himself staring at the entrance of his palace several times a day, which was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Because there was nobody he was waiting for. Nobody. Certainly not a certain grumpy emperor who hadn't shown up in 4 days. Xu Qing frowned. 4 days. Not that he was counting. He absolutely was not counting. That would imply he cared. And Xu Qing cared about very few things. Food, sleep, food, avoiding work, food. That was basically the list. Yet somehow, the palace felt strangely empty. The realization irritated him a lot. Bring me another pastry. The servant obeyed immediately. Food solved most problems. Unfortunately, this one remained. Across the palace, Emperor Li Wei was having his own problems. Unfortunately, his problem had a name. Xu Qing, Your Majesty, silence. Your Majesty, more silence. Your Majesty. Li Wei finally blinked. Minister Chen looked relieved. The entire court looked relieved. The emperor had spent the last 15 minutes staring at a memorial without turning a single page. Li Wei looked down. The document was upside down. Again. This was becoming embarrassing. The ministers collectively pretended not to notice. Everyone valued their lives. Continue. The meeting resumed for approximately 30 seconds. Then Li Wei's thoughts wandered again, back to Xu Qing. It was becoming a serious issue. Ever since the court incident, he found himself thinking about the man constantly. It made no sense. The Xu Qing he knew now felt entirely different from the one he had married. The old Xu Qing had been cold, defensive, sharp, always calculating. Now Li Wei understood why. The palace had been full of enemies. Every smile had hidden a knife. Every friendship had hidden a scheme. Xu Qing hadn't been cruel. He had been surviving. And somehow, after all the masks had fallen away, Li Wei found himself wanting to know the person underneath. The lazy man who loved duck more than politics. The strategist who accidentally saved an empire. The idiot who could dismantle a conspiracy while arguing about lunch. Li Wei rubbed his forehead. This was becoming a problem. That evening, Commander Zhao entered the imperial study, immediately sensing danger. Not physical danger, romantic danger. Far worse. Your Majesty. Li Wei looked up. What does Xu Qing usually do in the afternoons? Commander Zhao froze, then unfroze, then froze again. Was this a test? A trap? An execution set up? Your Majesty? Li Wei frowned. The question is simple. Commander Zhao wished it was. His Majesty usually naps, then eats again, sometimes naps after eating. Li Wei stared. Commander Zhao continued bravely. Occasionally he eats while planning his next nap. The emperor closed his eyes. Somehow this information made Xu Qing even more annoying. The next morning, several wagons appeared outside Xu Qing's palace. Xu Qing narrowed his eyes. Danger. Definitely danger. Nothing good ever arrived in wagons. The servants unloaded crates, and more crates, and even more crates. What is this? A eunuch bowed. His Majesty has sent gifts. Xu Qing looked suspicious. Why? The eunuch looked equally confused. Because His Majesty wanted to. Xu Qing immediately trusted the situation less. Inside the crates were snacks, tea, books, rare fruits, silk, medicine, paintings, 3 different kinds of pastries, and enough roast duck to feed a small army. Xu Qing stared, then looked toward the imperial palace. What exactly is he planning? Nobody knew, not even Li Wei. The gifts continued. Every day, without fail. It became ridiculous. One morning it was tea. The next morning it was sweets. The next day it was a famous chef. The day after that it was another famous chef. By the end of the week, Xu Qing owned more chefs than some provinces. This is ridiculous, Xu Qing announced. The servants wisely said nothing. Then Li Wei started appearing. Coincidentally, very coincidentally, suspiciously coincidentally, Xu Qing was eating lunch. Li Wei appeared. Xu Qing was feeding fish. Li Wei appeared. Xu Qing was walking through the gardens. Li Wei appeared. Xu Qing was attempting to nap beneath a tree. Li Wei appeared. At one point Xu Qing finally snapped. Your Majesty. Why are you here? Li Wei looked genuinely surprised. I was passing by. Xu Qing stared, then pointed. My palace is on the opposite side of the imperial city. A coincidence. You crossed 3 gardens. A coincidence. 2 lakes. A coincidence. The military training grounds. A strange coincidence. Xu Qing looked horrified. The emperor was becoming shameless. Weeks passed, then months, and somewhere during those weeks, something changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, quietly, naturally, like water slowly wearing down stone. Li Wei stopped inventing excuses. He simply came. Xu Qing stopped complaining. Well, he complained less, which was basically affection by Xu Qing standards. Morning tea became normal. Lunch became normal. Evening walks became normal. Arguments became normal. The servants eventually stopped reacting, because trying to understand their relationship was exhausting. One afternoon, Zizi arrived, took one look at the scene before her, and immediately sighed. Li Wei sat beside Xu Qing, reviewing documents. Xu Qing lay across a bench, eating grapes. Neither acknowledged the other, yet somehow they occupied the same space effortlessly, like they belonged there. Zizi pointed. "What is this?" Xu Qing looked up. "What? This?" She pointed harder. Xu Qing looked confused. Li Wei looked confused. Zizi wanted to scream. "You spend every day together." Neither responded. "You eat together." Silence. "You walk together." Silence. "You argue like an old married couple." Li Wei and Xu Qing exchanged a glance, then simultaneously looked away. Zizi stood up. "I'm leaving." Nobody stopped her. "You're both hopeless." Then she walked away, still muttering. That evening, Xu Qing woke from an accidental nap. A completely intentional accidental nap. The pavilion was quiet. The breeze was gentle. For a moment he felt disoriented. Then he noticed Li Wei sitting nearby, reviewing memorials. The emperor didn't look up, apparently accustomed to finding Xu Qing asleep beside him, which was strange. When had that become normal? Xu Qing watched him for a moment. The sharp features, the focused expression, the familiar presence. Something in his chest tightened, not painfully, just strangely. Then a terrifying realization hit him. If Li Wei stopped coming tomorrow, the pavilion would feel empty. The meals would feel quieter. The days would feel longer. Xu Qing immediately hated this realization a lot, because it meant somewhere along the way, the emperor had become important, not because of politics, not because of survival, not because he was emperor, just because he was Li Wei. Xu Qing stared. Li Wei looked up. Their eyes met. Immediately, awkwardly, dangerously. "What are you staring at?" Xu Qing looked away first. "Nothing." Li Wei raised an eyebrow. "You're lying." "Absolutely." A pause. Then Li Wei smiled. Small, barely visible, the kind of smile only Xu Qing ever got to see. "Good." Xu Qing frowned. "Good? Why?" Li Wei returned to his documents. Calm, composed, entirely too calm. "Because I was staring too." Xu Qing nearly choked. The emperor kept reading, as if he hadn't just launched a surprise attack. Xu Qing stared at him. Li Wei ignored him. The sun slowly set. The pavilion grew quieter, and for the first time since arriving in this world, Xu Qing realized something. Maybe peace had never been about avoiding. Maybe peace was simply finding someone whose presence felt like home, even if that person was an infuriatingly handsome emperor who kept ruining perfectly good naps. And honestly, Xu Qing wasn't entirely sure he minded anymore. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. It will encourage me for more.